This episode of The Ready Room is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
Hi, this is Michael Dorn, Lieutenant Commander Worf from Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Welcome to The Ready Room, show number 223, as canon adjacent as possible. I'm Christopher Jones, and with me today is Larry Nemecek. In this episode, we look ahead to the flood of new content headed to our screens in 2020, which is shaping up to be Star Trek's second golden age. We discuss Picard, Discovery Season 3, the animated short treks, and more. But first, we take time to remember three members of the Star Trek family who left us in recent months: Aron Eisenberg, Dorothy D.C. Fontana, and René Auberjonois. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's step into the Ready Room. Well, Larry, hello. It has been so long since I've seen you. I'm glad to see you in your human form today because earlier I was watching Star Trek Discovery. I was watching Brother, and Jet Reno is in there. And when they meet her, she's got Tellarite blood on her hands. And I immediately thought of you. And then I started wondering if your blood also was akin to certain marine invertebrates on Earth. But I see today you've come in your human form as you've entered the Ready Room.
What? Sorry, Sonny. What? What are you saying? What? Who are you again? What? I'm sorry. I just found this sofa.
Okay, Boomer Sooner.
I seem to be. Hey, let's not go there. Just you wait. We thought after a 5-year experiment it was worth trying to have a defense and recruit for one again. So now we're going to flip it and try an experiment about what having a defense looks like. So anyway,
gotta get a little sports ball in there. Little locker room.
I know we're
here
a little
all
over the map here because I do feel a little rusty.
Yeah, as do
Rust
I.
red, not crimson red. But
As
it's good
do
to
I.
see you again and talk again. Yeah.
But, here we are.
Here. My gosh.
Just like Jean-Luc Picard, 20 years after our last recording together, we're back together again to look back at... Wait, it hasn't been that long, has it, Larry?
No, it just feels like it.
No.
Hey, Gen Xer.
In about 6 months, I think. So, all right. But yeah, it's good to be back here in the Ready Room as we close out 2019 and to sit down with you on mic and talk about the things that we've chatted a bit about, on Twitter, both in our direct messages as well as the public side of Twitter. But we haven't really had a chance to talk about all the things that have happened. We've lost 3 very important people in the Star Trek world in recent months. And we've also got this onslaught of new Star Trek content that's been coming to us in the form of short treks. But soon we're going to have Picard. Down the road, we've got Lower Decks, and we've got Section 31, and we've got all kinds of stuff. So I thought today we could just talk about that, our general thoughts on what's coming up, and also reflect on Aron and Dorothy and René, who we lost in rapid succession here in the past few months.
Yeah, it was really, by the time, there was a couple months between Aron and Dorothy, and then by the time René came in, like you said, quick succession there, it was really starting to feel, to me, it was reminding me of early 2015 when Leonard died. And that was the gut punch. And then Harve Bennett passed. And then Grace Lee Whitney passed. And I remember thinking, God, is anybody going to be around for the 50th next year?
Yeah.
And thankfully, we did get through that. But I think that's what came to mind during the last couple of months. It was
Yeah.
like, wow, it's like revisiting that again. And what's interesting is I wish we could quantify this more, and I know CBS would love to, but we've had new shows come out. We've had new series starting. All this infrastructure of the well-oiled machine is trying to get well-oiled again with new owners and handlers, but it feels like we've got far more fans, even than we did in 2015, 2016, paying attention on different levels, or maybe fans returning to the fold or whatever. And it feels like people have been mourning these losses. And it's almost like this is how early 2015 felt like. And people were like nodding sagely, like going, "Oh, really? Tell us about it." I don't mean literally saying that, but I got that collective vibe across, online and some live touches with my live show on Tuesday. And it was just odd. It was like, be careful what you wish for, Lieutenant. You may get it. It's like we have really come out of the fallow time, and that's all for the good. But it's like, that's only been 4 years ago. The 50th was 3, and well, we're coming up on 2020 now. So, 2015, 2016. And it's a reminder again about how fast things have changed and how they're changing constantly. I mean, we've been off mic for 6 months, and I've seen a couple of trends just since probably in that time. So we should get into that. But it's really weird. It's like you can't stand still for a moment anymore, which is a good thing. I'm glad things are moving and changing and the shows are coming down the pike. But it's not just the output of shows. It's seeing how, to me, and then I'll shut up. It's seeing how just the product that we all sit down and talk about as fans, but then, like what I like to do, what we do here, obviously, and what I do, the story behind the story, the backstage end of it, how that's reflecting the change in media and landscape and streaming and the new paradigm of how people do TV.
Yeah.
And how they work it. And not to jump topics here, but like, oh, Michael Chabon's going to get to go off and do his own thing. So he's not going to be. 1 minute, it was a big deal to have a Pulitzer Prize winner come in and write dramatic scripts in a thing that was, he did it because he loves Trek and Picard and he was a good writer. He just hadn't written. So now he's gotten nursemaided through these difficulties, mister, and he's got up to speed on writing, on teleplays and script writing. And now he's going to go off and do his heart project, one of his own books and create that. And which is good for him, but it's like, wait, we just were praising him to the hilt for getting Picard, which we still haven't seen, but everybody is also rosy about it. And we don't get a second, and they're friggin' short seasons. They're not even like 26. But it's just like, wow, we live in such a different time now. We do. And of course, the generation, I don't know, K's.
Generation K.
They all, I'm going, how many farther back? We've only,
This is, the other side of the room is coming into the show, Larry, right here.
I'm just saying that, X, Y, and Z aren't enough. We got to go further back in the alphabet.
For people listening, we just had a long other side of the room conversation about the whole generational OK Boomer and Generation X, and now we've got Generation K apparently coming into this here.
I mean, I said OK sooner back to all those people for 5 or 6 days before. I thought, oh God, they come up with another thing? They come up with another thing. I remember when Go Big Red was just the big simple thing. Okay. Oops, we're sports balling again, Chris.
We are. Okay. Well, that brings up a lot of questions for me, actually. And as you were talking, I thought of 3 or 4 specific things I want to ask you about the upcoming series and the way television's being done and how the carousel of writers plays into it and all of that. So let's come back to that.
The carousel of writers. It is a merry-go-round. Yeah, it feels like. Yeah.
Let's come back to that in a little while. Before that, though, I do want to, because I haven't had a chance to, and
yes,
I want to talk about Aron and Dorothy and René, because used to, on the Ready Room, you and I would hop on mic when someone passed away. And when I did Hyperchannel by myself, I would always do a memorial when someone passed away. And not just main actors, but, anyone who was involved in the creative aspects of Star Trek and the creation of the franchise. And I haven't had a chance to do that in this case because of work. Anyone who follows me on Twitter probably knows how chaotic my work schedule continues to be. But hopefully 2020 will be different. We will see. But
in fact, I meant to say, please pass along to Chris. I think it's great that he's hired this clone to come into the show
right?
tonight, because I know how it can't possibly really be you, Chris.
It can't be me. No. I got that little spinny thing, from What Are Little Girls Made Of? And this is actually an Android version of me that you're talking to, but you'd never know because.
Oh, I just thought that was an OK Boomer sweatshirt hung over a .7 body. That's what I thought it was. But you're
Larry,
okay.
This is a Boomer OK Baby Yoda sweatshirt hung over a Chris clone body. That's what you're seeing right now and what you're hearing.
Sorry, I am. Pardon me, so. Okay.
Just sip your tea, Larry. Just stand there and sip your broth while I talk about this. But seriously here for a moment, losing Aron was a real shock to me, and we'll go in the order actually of when everyone passed away. Losing Aron is quite a shock for me because I didn't know Aron well, of course, but I had gotten to talk to him a number of times over the years. Back in 2015, when Aron was waiting for his kidney transplant, Matthew and I had Aron as a guest on the Orb, and we talked about Nog and we talked about various things. That's the Orb 95, if anyone wants to go back and listen. And then after that, I was able to talk to Aron on and off over the years. And, this is something I haven't mentioned publicly. I certainly didn't want to mention it in the aftermath of Aron passing away, but a lot of people have asked why Matthew and I have never done an Orb talking about the Deep Space Nine documentary. And we had been planning to do one. And actually, Aron was planning to join us for that. And we were working out the details just a few days, actually, before Aron passed away.
Oh, wow.
And I remember I was walking to the bookstore in Shinjuku to pick up Star Trek magazine if they had it. It's the only place I can get it here. And I was walking along, and I suddenly got a text message from Matthew, and it just said, "Very sad news about Aron." And I stopped walking, and I replied. I said, "What happened?" I've been so out of the loop lately, and I haven't really been reading Twitter, so I don't know if there was news. And he said he died tonight. And I said, "What?" with 3 exclamation marks and 3 question marks. I was so shocked. Like, wow. Because I had just talked to Aron a few days before that. And I didn't know that.
Oh, really?
There was
a
anything.
Few days, like
4
or 5 days or something.
I think like 5 or 6, like within the week, during that week before.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any indication that there was anything wrong. And so I was really shocked. And, we were working out the details of recording the Orb. And so, it was just really, really sad. And, Aron, he was like so many cast members of Star Trek are, and certainly have become in this age of social media. But Aron, he was so engaging with the fans, and he talked to the fans all the time. And he was such a bright light, and he was optimistic, and he was someone where, he pushed back against some of the things that are happening in the world that I think we all think are threatening our future, of course. But when he engaged with the fans as well, he was just always optimistic. And I sometimes feel very stressed, and I feel like the world is just crumbling on my shoulders. And, I would read his tweets and see that, here's someone who I know the health challenges that he's been through. I have my own, luckily not as serious. And he fought through all that and carried this optimism and made everyone feel happy and made fans feel appreciated. And, that's something that I'll always remember about him. And he died so young. So it was really a shock.
Yeah. The thing, I think all of these cases, they're all Star Trek people we've lost. And again, and not to not mention, Robert Walker Jr. has passed away. I mean, there have been several of the guest stars that are, near and dear to people, other folks along the last few. But yeah, these 3 stuck out. And I'm sure the actors We'll get to René in a minute, but Aron and Dorothy is more like a name on a shelf to more people. I want to talk about her a little bit. But Aron was one who, it was one thing. He's so gregarious. And yes, everything you said. And in the real world, what that took the form of was if you'd gone to a convention, he was a staple at Vegas and at some of the cons. He's been over to DST in England. He's gone to smaller conventions too, but he was so out there. And but that personality, when you see it one-to-one, was the first thing. And then we get into the social media wave. Yes, on Twitter especially, he would get into conversations with people, and it was bridging, the social divide, made it very alive. And then I think the crowning thing was he shined in the documentary. In What You Leave Behind. Yeah. It was almost like, now in hindsight, I've said this a couple other places, it's almost like, and when he got emotional, and they even promoting the documentary, they would pull out his little clip and use that when he says that bit about these are 7 years that were great years and I'll never get this, and he's also someone who that didn't define him. He didn't, on one hand, the kidney affliction that he had stunted his growth when he was younger, but on the other hand, it gave him, is the glass half full or half empty? Mm-hmm. He's playing a kid on the show that they allowed to mature, but he's basically a much older person playing a young, Ferengi or not. He's playing this much younger person that he might not have had he been older. He would be very frank about that. After DS9 ended, he couldn't get acting. For the most part, he was doing a lot of, regular work, not acting work, just to get by. He had a kid. He had a life to get through. Yeah. And then, at the conventions and things. But Aron was never like he's clinging to it, or like the old Hollywood trope about the actors that go to the signing shows are too old to get real work. And so they have to scrape by, which used to be a look down thing. And today, in the media world today, it's like, oh, well, if you get a Star Trek, you've got it. I mean, it's like there's no shame anymore. It's all celebrated. It's not looked down on. But with Aron, it was never a case of, for a while, he was like, I don't want to, I mean, a lot of the actors, not so much now, but even Next Gen and DS9 and initially Voyager, a lot of actors and the guest one-offs and the recurrings, they don't get it. That it's not a come down to come to the conventions and the signing shows and sign. It's not like, oh, I can't do anything else. I'm a failure. All I can do, air quotes, is go and sell my autograph. I'm such a pathetic person. And that's not what it is. People love seeing people. And it's funny how sometimes these actors have to be persuaded that it's not a come down to go. People want to see them. Yeah. Especially the ones that had a big career, or if they're attached to
these days. They understand it more.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're there. But like 10, 15, 20 years ago when DS9 ended, and Aron was one of those initially that was like, oh, I'm trying to get work as a, it's the thing about if I keep living in the past, I can't get new work.
You're right.
And then if there is no new, it's like a double-edged sword. It's like But he's one that always embraced it. And then, yes, as we moved into the media age and the social age, he was always so enthusiastic to be out there. Initially, he had to be convinced and shown the way. And part of this is when he, during his health difficulties the last few years, when he met Melissa. Mm-hmm. And and she was so supportive of him and got him through the last couple of hurdles and was there. And that's why, we all feel bad for her, but she's been a trooper and, hung up and celebrated his life and is finding her own way. But the whole thing of the social and then the doc, it's almost like they all lined up through all of that and through him. It's almost the way George Takei in one way. It's like Marina. Mm-hmm. Some of the other Twitter stars of Star Trek, the biggest ones, have found this broader audience and an even bigger fan base beyond the people that watch their show. They're finding fans because he did get up and talk about aspirational, political and social and health, people suffering with health, and inspirational for all of that, so that he found an audience way beyond the initial little tight, oh, I loved you as Nog on DS9 circle.
Yeah.
And that's why it's almost like the doc was like a cherry on top for that. Mm-hmm. We didn't know at the time, but it's like, what a great kind of final statement to everybody. Because he is pretty vulnerable and bare, the footage that they used.
Yeah. And it's all authentic in the doc as well.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I mean. And it was just like, wow, what a great note to go out on. What a great, I wouldn't have wished that, but if that's the way it's going to happen, what a great final act to give to people, to the inspirational and the affirming about the show, but just the way he carried himself and would talk to people. And then when people did actually see him live, which is why, again, his passing, and anytime anybody leaves suddenly, it's a shock, it's a double shock anyway.
Right.
So that was piled on top of it, but it really did. So
that's Aron. He was 50, only 50 when he died, which is less than 3 years older than me. So that's, something that I also can connect with. I mean, we're close to the same age. So, so Aron will certainly be remembered by us all. And he passed away on September 21st. And then December 2nd, Dorothy Fontana, DC Fontana, passed away.
Yeah.
And I never had a chance to meet her or even to talk to her in any way. Her name, of course, is very well known to me because of her role in the original series as the story editor in the first 2 seasons, and the fact that she worked with Gene Roddenberry on many of his other projects, The Lieutenant, Genesis 2, and, of course, the animated series. She's very important in that. And she wrote Yesteryear, which has played a big part in Star Trek Discovery, certainly in young Spock, as we see. And she also worked on other shows that I watched growing up, like The $6 Million Man and Buck Rogers. And so she's someone that I know very well because of her work and her involvement in television.
Yeah, don't forget Roots Next Generation.
And Roots Next Generation.
Wrote Farpoint and Encounter at Farpoint, the pilot, and was in the think tank early on.
She also wrote an episode of Deep Space Nine, my favorite Star Trek series. She wrote Dax, the early episode. Well, she wrote the teleplay together with Peter Allen Fields for that one, which is where Jadzia put on trial for the crimes of Curzon, which is an interesting look at Trill Society, and a good episode in the first season of DS9.
First stab at it, yeah.
Like I said, I never got to know her personally in any way, but of course you did, so I'm curious to hear your memories of Dorothy.
Well, Dorothy is a lot like Bob Justman, and David Gerald. Those people that, if you're of that generation of fandom, where you learned about Star Trek not by watching the bonus features on Blu-rays and DVDs, but you read your copy, you got your Making of Star Trek by Stephen Poe, actually. And then you read David's book, The World of Star Trek, and you got his Making of Tribble's book. And that was the early grounding. And those names, and Gene Coon is in there too, but he died so soon, nobody had a shot to know him any better. And then fast forward, and then the times change, and we're into the movies in the Harve Bennett era, and now we're making Next Generation. And I, just kind of being in the con scene, and not so much the inner circle of professional, but knowing B. Joe Trimble and the effect they had on the letter writing campaign, the mail campaign, and then launching Lincoln Enterprises and all these new paradigm things that Star Trek broke the mold over anyway and got us into the media age. But to come to LA and be all sucked up into the boom years of now the Berman era, we'd say, but Next Gen, and doing all the thing, the companion for Next Generation and working on the communicator and early StarTrek.com, all that stuff, and never working on original series era pieces really, unless I just sat down and made the time for it. And then somewhere along the way thinking, oh my God, these people are still around. I really do need to go talk to them and find them. And finally, like maybe bit by bit, at a convention or whatever, Bob Justman, I'd gotten to interview. I went to his house. We talked for 4 hours on tape to background Next Generation. I'm just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. And we're not even talking about the original series. We're just talking about the setup for Next Gen. But it's like those people that you read about and you grew up reading about their descriptions, or you'd see a picture in the book and it's their 60s picture, or their 70s picture. And then you meet them in real life and it's like, and you're dealing with them. It's the same way you do with actors and other celebrities or, sports figures or whatever. But actors and sports figures and musicians and whatever, if you actually meet them to work with them, they've got that celebrity glow, right? But when you're meeting behind the scenes people, they don't carry that around with them. Mm-hmm. Ordinary people out on the street, 99.9% of the world, as opposed to actors, musicians, sports figures, are going to be seen and recognized, and they aren't, and they don't have that glow. And so it's like whatever you have for them, you're carrying it around from your own knowledge. And maybe sometimes you have to be introduced before, because you don't recognize them. But Bob and his big mustache. But Dorothy, when you read between the lines in those things and you talk later on, she was like, the office was crazy. Bob made the trains run on time. But even he could be, crazy. You read the crazy memos and, things going between Gene and Gene Kuhn and him and Herb Solo. But Dorothy was like this. She had a sense of humor. She wasn't a stick in the mud. But it's like almost like Dorothy was the one that was the sane head, right? The sane one. But you don't think about all that. So here we are. And thanks again, Rod, for coming to me about hosting the Trek Files, because that was really kind of the impetus just the last couple of years. Now, the last 10 years or so in the fallow time, I would see Dorothy at a small convention she and Denny would go to, her husband, who works in visual effects, won an Oscar. I can't think which movie it was right off, but was on the team that won an Oscar. And, and she wrote over the years, but I think it was a little convention in not the big one, not Comic-Con, but a little convention, Condor, I think, in San Diego in 2016. They were celebrating the 50th. And we got to sit down for the first time and talk personally. I had a lot of questions, and I didn't even think about an interview or talking. I just slapped my phone down and turned the audio recorder on. At one point, I was like, I should be recording this,
We say that a lot, Larry, before we're doing podcasts.
Yes, I should be recording this. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling here, but the best thing was when Rod came up with the Trek Files idea, and it really struck me as we got into these documents from different eras, and just the different eras. And it's like, well, we're trying to find older things that reflect on the original series and the animateds and the movies produced and unproduced and the origins of Next Gen, and what we can be relevant for the modern series, DS9 and later, is finding things that apply to them and trying to find relevancy, not just, history, fun history, but things that apply later, which is kind of the challenge and also the fun of how we do the Trek Files. So I hope if you haven't listened, please give it a listen. And they're short. I know it's shocking, right? They're short.
Anyone listening to this show will think that's shocking. Yeah.
I know. Anybody, so that was the joke. But the point here is, I had to, and they're short, so we have people come in as guests, and they will get 2, 3, 4 episodes out of them, and we'll get lunch, and they'll come over to the Roddenberry building and their office, and we'll do that, And we had Dorothy come over twice. The first time we had a makeshift studio upstairs, and they don't have an elevator, and I didn't even think about it. And she got there and she's like, oh, and Dorothy was, the shocking thing about her passing is the same thing you felt. You just talked to Aron 4, 5, 6 days before he passed. Mm-hmm. Not quite that short a span with Dorothy, but we had her in recording in May and she was fine. Now, she's another person that you go and look up the age and you go, oh, she's 80? Because I would have said she was, 65 or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But she was great. She's still there. She has her memory. She'll talk, and she's, unlike some of us, she's very succinct with her answers. But she'll talk. She will answer. And part of the overall goal about Dorothy was, I know people young writers would correspond with. She taught at the American Film Institute here. She lectured at AFI and passed on her writing. She, judged. Over the years, she had done committees with the Writers Guild, and she'd won awards for her guild, for her fellow writers for her craft. Even when she was out of the spotlight, I mean, she had a life that went on beyond Star Trek. But just on a personal level, having her come in a couple of times and just going through those memos and going, oh, I'm going to pull this back. This is weird. I'm going to have to ask Dorothy about this. It's from something from 64 or 66 or 73 and go, oh, this would be a great one to ask Dorothy about and pull that aside. Or even in all the 20-something years I've written my column for the Titan magazine, the Star Trek magazine over there, getting a question and thinking, oh, here's one Dorothy would answer. And just there a lot of the behind the scenes folks I'll email or call and I'll get a horse's mouth answer for. So all of that kind of thing, she was great for doing that. It wasn't just me. I know she didn't go to a lot of conventions, but when she did, or somebody actually had a serious conversation with her, she could be very, she would be helpful. And that's why I'm so glad we got 3 and 3 episodes with her, and we talked about what we talked. We would talk about what we did across all the eras, original series, Lieutenant, and how they came together, and original series and the animateds, and the Next Gen Roots times, all of those, and talking about Jean, and because that same feeling, it was a shock when I heard she passed, and I swear to God, my first reaction was, well, F word. It's like, I was so spoiled. Mm-hmm. I really felt like shamed at being spoiled and not taking her for granted. But because the first time she came over, she had to go upstairs to record, and I felt horrible. She was like, "Oh, stairs." And I'm like, "Oh, that's right. She's not, she's older than I think she is." And the second time, "Dorothy, can you come back and record some more? We're on the first floor now." But it was great. And we talked, and the last time I said bye, like in May, it was like, well, I don't want to abuse this, but maybe in a year and a half, we'll come back and record some more. Yeah. And I'll pull out some great things for you. But the first thing when I heard she passed was, well, damn. I have been so spoiled. It's like Spock in Sitting on the Edge of Forever. I am a fool for not recording. We were recording in a sense, but it was like, it's like you have this direct pipeline to 1964. Yeah. And we weren't ignoring it. We used it. But it's like we were so blessed. She's one of the last, if not the last, of the era to ask those questions about Jean and Bob. She was the witness, and I'm just so thrilled that we did have her. And, she did a lot of interviews over the years. She's in a lot of the Blu-ray and docs and different things. She's in Chaos on the Bridge, I think. Maybe, even for the early Next Gens. Yeah. But
I feel that, the podcasting format allows us to have a more candid conversation with people than those special features do, which is why I started this network.
And those are edited.
Well, those are edited, but also they're more structured as well. And, exactly what you were able to do with Dorothy, to get all that background information and record that history so that we know the real story for the future. That's the reason I started this network 10 years ago, because I wanted to have a platform not only to discuss what I think about the series and all, but to actually record the memories and record the thoughts of people who have worked on the show. And over the years, over the past decade, we've been quite successful at talking to many, many people. Mm-hmm. And of course, you are very much so with the Trek Files, and John and Ken and Rod are with Mission Log. And it's been in recent years where you were talking a moment ago about how some of the actors didn't quite embrace interacting with the fans early on, but they've come around more so these days. And you see that in the age of podcasting too, where it's much easier for us to have these dialogues with them.
Yeah. And I just to clarify that, I didn't mean to say actors weren't keen on embracing with fans. I meant in the beginning, they weren't keen on being seen to be selling their autographs for money, like that's the only income they had. Well,
that's a specific thing, yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say, and don't take what I'm saying the wrong way either, because I don't mean it to be like, oh, the actors don't appreciate fans, because I certainly know that's not the case. And in fact, if you watch many of the discussions, say, with Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart and Jerry Bryan and Jonathan Del Arco leading up to Picard, it's one thing Jerry said very specifically how wonderful the fans are, and that we would not be here without you. So, of course, the fans do know that. But what I have noticed is that the dialogue between fans and creators, there's a bridge that's been created, I'd say, in the last 5 years especially. I feel it more and more. And that's why we do what we do with podcasting, I guess, is one point that I'm making. And it's so wonderful to get to the specific point of the discussion right now that you were able to have all that time with Dorothy.
Well, and you say that, I mean, on one hand, it was, but on the other hand, it's like, it was, aside from like the time we sat down at the con and talked, or I could email, I emailed her. I had a, okay, finish the thought, Larry. The 6 episodes we have actually represent, a couple of hours one year and a couple of hours another. So it's not like we were suddenly, in the Quilt Guild together or something. I mean, but you feel like you had to have and what I meant about video by nature, there's so much cutting room floor, and maybe it all gets repurposed if the stuff survives, whatever. But she has done her share of interviews over the years and was always, from what I can tell, pretty glad to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, there was a time when I first writing The Next Gen Companion, and she was so open-hearted and good-spirited about sharing and doing all that, and just the same way she was when she was working. She was like the sane head and the even-keeled person. And that comes through in any of the interviews you see or hear with her, right? The one exception to that was when she and David both felt so burned the first year of Next Generation, when they all came in at the beginning, and then by midway through, they'd all the original folks had gone, pretty much, and especially by the end of the year. And when I was doing the Next Gen Companion on 3 months time frame, madly trying to bridge the pre-Pillar era with all the crazy that happened, and most everybody then, nobody wanted to talk about it because they were all so pissed or burned. Yeah. She didn't want to talk about it. David Jarrell wouldn't talk about it. Maury Hurley, who was alive then, didn't want to talk about it. And it's like, okay, it was really hard. You had to go back to original interviews at the time to get bare bones info from them. And it's like, and Dorothy said, I will talk to you about anything. I just don't want to talk about the first year of Next Generation. I'm like, okay, that's what I have. That's what's in front of me that I have to do right now. And then as you hear on Trek Files, as you've seen in some of these documentaries and other things and other interviews, it's like the statute of heat limitation has evaporated, and people, time has to go by. And David's the same way. And now we've got the Shatner's Chaos on the Bridge documentary, and gets it out there. And how in the world he ever got Maury Hurley to talk only a few months before he passed was amazing, and I'm glad it happened. But even that sore spot went away, and she was open to talking. And I know we've gone on and on and on here about Dorothy, and we haven't got to Renee yet. But part of what I do, and it's people like Bob. He died in 05, 06, something like that. And I was trying to get him out in front of fans and getting out there, because we had to have enough generational change where people didn't, or maybe the original series wasn't, the pendulum swinging and people weren't as with it. It's like, while we had these treasures and also first line memory, eyewitness to this stuff, and other That's people key. Which is, Portal 47 is about that. So it's like, as long as we've got them, it's like their own stuff, and just talk about the people that aren't here to talk about themselves. First line, first-hand memories. Yeah. And they're all, they're all going. So that's why it was, doubly.
I see.
Doubly
and
precious.
This explains one thing, Larry, on my bookshelf over there. I have a version of your companion that has a sticker on the cover that says All the Crazy Edition. So I must have gotten the one that where they did finally spill the beans. Wow. I've been wondering about that sticker all these years.
With me, since I could have put some crazy into it, but Pocket's like, nope, these pages are done. Their pages are done. Yeah. But no, we've got other ways to fill in. Yeah.
But it's great to hear those memories of Dorothy Fontana, and
it's sad to have somebody pass like that, and your first reaction is like, damn, I'm so spoiled, And on one hand, I did appreciate it. I did try to do something about it, but it's like, we were so blessed to have this, like I said, direct pipeline, direct link to those times, which we really don't have. There's very, 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 very few people from the era.
Yeah. So she will be greatly missed as well.
Beyond the actors, we're watching the cast dwindle down now.
But in a way...
But I'm talking beyond those actors. They've been around forever. Their faces have been... They've talked a blue, streak for 50 years.
I'm talking about the real people. Information through those different channels, because the interactions are different, the roles are different. So
yeah.
Another shock. 6 days after Dorothy Fontana passed away.
Yeah.
On December 8th, René Auberjonois, 1 year younger than Dorothy, passed away at the age of 79. Of course, Odo from Deep Space Nine is what most people these days think of first when they think of him. I still think of him, of course, I think of him as Odo probably first as a Star Trek fan, but the other thing that immediately pops into mind for me is him playing Clayton Endicott III on Benson, because that's where I first saw him. And I watched, in my, what Benson was on in the 80s, 80 to 86. So I was about 10, 12, 14 years old going through that time. So I remember him then. And I remember when Deep Space Nine came out and they showed the cast, and I'm like, oh, it's Clayton Endicott's going to be on Deep Space Nine.
I know him. He shaved his mustache. Yeah.
But
are they
those are only two things.
I forget Ethan's character. But yeah.
Is he going to be there too? But those are only two things, because René actually had an amazing, long, storied career spanning 60-something years. And he was inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame a year ago.
He had a huge Broadway career.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how he and Armin knew each other before Deep Space Nine, because they did a lot of stage together. And you can tell the chemistry between those two characters, Quark and Odo, in the first season is so much more there, locked in right away, for me anyway, as a viewer, compared with the other characters. And it's because they knew each other and they had this relationship of having worked together. But also last year, 2018, Theater Hall of Fame Awards in New York, he was honored there. And this year, just a few weeks before he passed away, the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival honored him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I think it just reflects the depth of his career that he had in areas that I think many viewers, many Star Trek fans may not be aware of. And
we're talking beyond Colonel West.
Beyond Colonel West, which exactly. And of course his appearance on Enterprise and Oasis as well.
Yeah.
What always struck me about René and what he did with Odo on DS9, and now I see it with Doug Jones, with Saru on Discovery. And really, most of the actors really are like this on Star Trek, because they get these wonderful Shakespearean stage actors who can really convey emotion, who they put these prosthetics on them and they come through. But most of these characters, you see them here and there. Odo was there all the time. And not only that, but Odo's face was very nondescript by nature, because of his character as a shapeshifter who can't do faces. And yet he was able to convey so much emotion through that makeup. And that always stood out to me from the beginning. And every time I watch DS9, I do a rewatch, I just notice more and more what an incredible job he did with that character.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a craft in acting. They say acting with a mask, and it goes back to the ancients, and you watch Greek theater and having the mask. But in the modern world, the whole thing of acting through prosthetics, which I don't know if you've noticed, but it's done nothing but to the 47th power, the more we get into CG and prosthetics. Yeah. But and then you're on something like Star Trek, where these Andy Robinson and Armin and Casey Biggs and René and everybody who's had to, Michael Dorn with Worf. I mean, anybody who's had to work through the mask, it's literal, like slathered on prosthetics or whatever, but having to come through that, the skill, because a lot of people, you put that on and they're just buried, but it takes that theater training. And even then, not all theater, just because you had theater acting and you had 20 years on Broadway or something, or the stages or whatever rep company you're in, I have a feeling that, he wouldn't like it, but I bet Patrick, Brent wore the gold paint, but it didn't really he still had full range of his face.
Right.
Poor LeVar had to wear his visor all the years. They played with getting rid of it and writing it out and all that. But any of these, John Billingsley is great, even though the Denobulan things are light.
It's lighter.
Having to do that. But those guys that were in the massive, and when the Ferengis and Wayoon and whatever, if you think about all the Anyway, acting through the mask takes a special skill, but it's those guys who are stage trained and can emote. You know, if you're projecting to the back row, suppose, you know, the simplistic way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But making, like you said, and Odo. It's not like it's ridges and texture and layers. It's pretty thin. It's just blandifies. Is that a word?
It is now.
Your whole face. And so to come through, and that was on this side of the room. It just, you know, like you said, to come through the blandest of masks.
I just think it reflects what a wonderful talent he was. And, you know, like Dorothy, I never had a chance to meet René or talk to him, but I'm sure you've had some interactions with him. What kind of memories do you have of him?
Well, oddly enough, and this was 6 days after Dorothy passed?
6 days, yeah.
I was just really shocked when Dorothy passed because she felt so very present and she had not seemed ill. And over the summer, I had helped connect her to some people that were trying to get some scripts autographed and answered a question for a fan who had been wanting me, and I promised them I would in my column in the magazine, and then he would pop up on Tuesday Live and say, did you ask her? I'm like, okay, I keep forgetting. And I finally asked her, and she did, and I got it into print, so he was thrilled, and it was a great question about Journey to Babel. But it was, even though I hadn't seen her since May, it was very present. Now, René was a shock. I had heard that he had this cancer diagnosis a ways back and was had been surprised and pleased that he had seen, you know, he'd done the cruise, he was doing conventions up until he kind of blossomed his social, the last 2 or 3 years, his Twitter, and then he had turned it over to minions just in the last few months.
Which, by the way,
was a little telling.
To clarify, because they did this on their account, that's a term that they use their minions. So it's not meant to be a derogatory term. It's like an actual term.
Not at all.
They even had to explain it on the account after they themselves used it once, and I think a few people took it the wrong way.
Yeah. And it's not capital M, so we're not infringing on any
and they're not yellow,
any Pixar or whatever. Yeah. Yes, they're not yellow. Yeah. But you know, in contrast to Dorothy, I think it struck me odd because I of a lot of the actors, some I'm closer to, and I'm not saying this to whatever, some you just wind up working with or in projects, and some are very gregarious and you cross paths with them a lot, and some not, and depends on what conventions they do or how many and all that. And typically when I would see René, Armin would be standing right there, and I just knew Armin so well that I would kind of tend to go that way. I very rarely saw him alone. And I was going back through my huge interview archive that we're doing on, and yes, we will do some new on speaker remastered interviews. But maybe I should do this. I keep trying to figure out what to do next. But I think the only actual by phone or live interview I did with René was as part of a set visit for Far Beyond the Stars, and I grabbed him. I wasn't particularly close to him, but he was approachable. Sometimes René could come across as gruff as Odo was at times, but he really wasn't. It was just that's just kind of the aura that came. And as long as you were like a real person and weren't a freak not a freak, you weren't, an idiot or a moron or somebody he needed.
That's
any
much
human
better,
being
Larry.
would want to keep their distance. I know. I don't know where my head is. As long as you were a trustable person that seemed to have some legitimacy, he was fine. As the shield that we would all carry around us, okay, as far as interacting with strangers. And we had a nice 15, 20-minute conversation about Far Beyond the Stars and some things in general. But I was like, did we ever do an actual interview over the years? And I was like, oh, good. It's like, okay, fine. I have this little 20-minute thing here with him, whatever. But it was odd because, of course, he was a regular in a cast. He's and Aron, not putting Aron in a box here, but when, there is a billing to things, and it's not just the billing and marquee value, it's the screen time, which translates into emotional impact on viewers. And so it's a fact that of the post-original series cast, from Next Generation onward, René was the first of the regulars to pass. And so that kind of exposure has an impact on people. And then he had the career way beyond. And I was going to say, for me, I didn't watch Benson that much. Now, Soap I did, but not Benson so much. I remember it going by. I wasn't thrilled. But what's wacky...
Benson was a spinoff of Soap, for those of you listening who
I'm sorry.
weren't around then.
Yeah. I watched Soap religiously, but...
then people are like, what's Soap?
But Soap, yeah. So it was a parody of soap operas, and it was great. Yeah. Had great cast. But Benson was their butler on the show. But what, weirdly, and I was way too young to see it in theaters. It was an adult movie. But years later, when I would see it, on TV or whatever, I go back to him being the original Father Mulcahy in MASH.
Ah, right. In the film version.
Which I think I read recently, the original film that the TV show MASH, the only cast member to come off from the movie was Gary Berghoff playing Radar. Everything else was recast for the series, and, it's a classic. But he was the original Father Mulcahy, and it was just one of those things that sticks in your mind. And so, when I saw him being Colonel West, I saw the PR pictures go by in TV Guide, even though I didn't watch Benson. I remember him being, on the show way more than Ethan Phillips being in the show, because he just had that carriage and that air, and he could put that persona on. So René, my take was, I was hoping maybe things had, maybe something in reversed or I hadn't heard correctly. So to me, it was kind of like And then I reflected the last year or so how he had really gone all out to kind of make a big effort to connect with fans, maybe even more than he had over years prior on his social networks. And he did the cruise, and he did Vegas and Destination Star Trek in the UK and Europe, and it's again, he's a regular, and that's going to stop the Trek world, and then someone who's got that career behind him there and stop everything for a few times while people, get their mourning and reflecting in.
Well, hopefully we will not lose too many more people, or anyone, hopefully, in 2020. But the one thing that all of this made me think of is the fact that the franchise is now at a point where, what are we, 53 years? Going into 54?
Yeah.
Where we are going to be losing a lot of people just because that's how nature works.
Right. From the early years, and also the big bulge of the 80s, 90s, aughts shows.
Yeah. So this is going to be happening, sadly, more and more often, I think. But certainly we will remember Aron and Dorothy and René. And I'm glad we had a chance to just chat here because, like I said up front, I have not had a chance because I haven't podcasted in so long. I have not had an opportunity. I sent out a few tweets, and that's all I've been able to do. So it's good to reflect on everything they've brought us and appreciate that, and know that they'll continue to live on as we watch these series over and over.
Yeah, and the only thing to add to that is we are going to, it's inevitable. We hate it, but we are going to lose our heroes, our creatives. What's made this, and I said at the beginning, what's made this harder than it might otherwise be is when they clump up like this, and we feel like we're just being, blindsided left and right, double whammy, triple whammy. That's just a fluke of timing. That's nothing, but we'll in a weird way, we will almost remember those more than we will when, we individually remember people who have passed. Mm-hmm. But again, that's a function of the fact that we've had when you're that successful and you've been around that long, it's going to feel that way. And it's inevitable. So we'll reflect and celebrate and mourn as that happens. It's just really odd when you do have like I said, in 2015, when we had a clump of those. Well,
and it does happen
all at once.
And they say it so often happens in threes. So,
mm-hmm.
Well, Larry, in keeping with the theme of the passage of time, let's go on and talk about the next Star Trek series, which is coming up on January 23rd. Star Trek Picard. It's set 20 years after Nemesis.
There's a new series?
Oh, you're one of the many people who's not aware that there's a new series. I've heard of you.
Actually, Chris, I've had people in Trek media have conversations with me about how they have conversations with people who are borderline fans, or they're like genre fans, or they should know, or they've been Trek fans in the past, and how they're unaware of those. And I'm like, how is that happening? Because I feel like I think CBS has done a good job, even like saturating maybe. And here in the States, they ran a new commercial that I finally saw today. They ran a new commercial, took advantage of the NFL CBS audience, during football. Because if there's anything that can reunify a tired, distraught world, divided and coming apart at the seams, it's Jean-Luc Picard.
And his pit bull sidekick, number one.
His pit bull's the number one. So it's like, if there's anything that's worth promoting on NFL football, it's a Picard Star Trek series. And apparently, they did, and they've used. So but that's another take. But that really threw me that there really are people, like mainstream people, because the geeks did win. We're in a world. It's not like 1985 anymore, where you have to stay in the closet. It's okay to talk about. The world didn't notice that Leonard Nimoy died because the geeks are running media.
Right.
So because they represent most of the world now. I mean, that's the thing. So to think that it doesn't make sense to run Picard during NFL playoff games or regular season games there is crazy. So anyway, this talk about some folks are saying they don't seem to be aware of it is just, now where you are, I could understand.
Yeah, I mean, I've encountered people here in Japan who are Star Trek fans who had no idea that there was a new series coming with Patrick Stewart as Picard. But part of that is because there is no promotion of Star Trek in Japan, because Star Trek is not very popular here. And also, what promotion you do see through social media, such as Twitter, by CBS, is just a black box that says, this video is not available in your location, because for some reason, even though they're marketing a property that's available around the world through their partner, Amazon Prime, they're geo-blocking, which is very frustrating, and I'm not going to get off this soapbox, but please stop doing that,
and
marketers.
Then, if they're leaning, is Prime going to carry it in Japan?
Here it will be Prime.
Amazon, yeah.
But we would need to get the promotions through Amazon Prime Japan account, and Star Trek's not something they're going to be promoting here. So we're going to move on from this. I'm not going to stay on my soapbox during the show. I'll do that on Twitter in my occasional tweets, but I used to be a marketing director. I've worked in media my entire career.
Oh, what do you know, Chris?
If you're marketing a product, take advantage of the audience. It's a global audience. You don't need to geo-block the actual tweets that are promoting it. You can block access to viewing CBS All Access and make people go to Amazon Prime. I understand that. But, a 30-second video clip promoting it, raising awareness that it's coming, you don't need to geo-block that. Star Wars doesn't geo-block theirs, Larry.
You're preaching to the space choir, Chris.
Anyway,
I'm with you.
But let's talk about the show. So, in the beginning, you were talking about things before we talked about Aron and Dorothy and René, and you were talking about how much new content is coming out. And one thing that does concern me a little bit, and I think we've talked about it here on Past Ready Rooms, is that we might get too much content too quickly, like oversaturating the market. I don't think Picard will be one of those shows, however, because first of all, it's Picard, it's Patrick Stewart, and now we know that Riker's coming back and Troy's coming back and Brent Spiner is coming back as one variation of the android. I don't know. I don't think it's Data in that drawer. It could be Lore.
No.
It could be Lore.
Right.
I don't know.
And the assembled...
But what has been made clearer in the subsequent trailers, which I have seen, is that at least so far it appears that when we see Data, those are dream sequences or memories of Picard. Because in one of them, both Data and Picard are in their TNG series uniforms, and Picard has his Captain Pips on and so forth in the Vineyard. So it's very interesting to see him come back, though, and I'm glad that all these characters are coming back.
Wouldn't it have been funny if they'd used the spandex instead of the jackets?
And the one with
they had their
zipper?
build-tie spandex.
Yeah,
with the yoke that goes the colored cord across the. Yeah. If they'd been in their Bill Tice spandex and not their Bob Blackman redos.
But the story itself looks quite interesting, and for them to dig down and bring Hugh, of all characters, back, who appeared in only 2 episodes, to bring 7 of 9 in.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it makes sense with Picard's story that the Borg could be brought into the story in some way. Therefore, it makes sense to bring Jerry Ryan back as 7 of 9. It makes sense to bring Jonathan Del Arco back as Hugh. And yet, it doesn't seem like they're going to be relying on those past elements as a crutch as much as it's going to be enhancing the story, because there seems to be a much bigger new story that they're telling.
An integral part of the story. Yeah, I mean, it's very, this is what gets me about everybody who lumps everything in. For one thing, it's not like there's one small pool of people. There is to some extent. It's a little bit like the way the old shows were, but we're in a totally different paradigm of media. Mm-hmm. There are different writing staffs working on season 3 Discovery and Picard. Picard was shot in West Coast. Discovery is still back east. And by the way, it's funny again. Once again, I don't know if this made a blip. It surely wasn't as big as it was the first time. But the state of California's little film commission that approves who gets tax credits on productions did it again for season 2 of Picard. So once again, your state of California tax dollars are bringing you Star Trek news before CBS All Access deigns to tell you. Although they've been talking about writing season 2 for forever and when they're going to go back and film and all that. Yeah. But the state of California made it official that they got their tax credit again for season 2, should they decide to take it.
Well, they have to. I mean, it's a show that starts off in a vineyard. I mean, you've got to have it there. You got Chateau Picard maybe that are actually being paid with cases of Chateau Picard. So, Larry, if Picard is shot in the West, Discovery is in the East, that means Lower Deck is going to be shot down under, right?
Well, it's in the title, Chris. What, do you think we're morons? What do you...
And they're going to bring Men at Work back to do the theme song, and then everyone's going to get upset because it's the first series since Enterprise to have lyrics in the theme. And
I see you've been putting a lot of thought into this.
As I sip my coffee here. I mean, my broth.
It really, I have to share something, though, that the other day, like I've said for the last year or two, about the time people were starting to freak out, and this gets back to what you were worried about over exposure.
Yeah.
Like about a year or so ago, people were freaking out a little bit when all this, it's like the glass half full, half empty. When Alex re-upped his contract, and then almost on the heels of just saying he had signed on to be, like the new Rick Berman, basically.
The supreme leader of Star Trek?
The supreme, yes, right. We no longer have a Supreme Court. We have a supreme leader, the Grand Nagus of Star Trek. Then they roll out all these ideas, and some of them haven't come to fruition. Some, that was the long list that included the Con, on the ground Con series, and the Academy series, and had a lot of. They were very specific rumors that were being reported in the legit trades, which is why you gave them stock. But then again, it's things in production, things in development, and sometimes things with the best
and those
intentions
things may still
just
come along. They're just not.
They may still come along. They may just be right. But my point is, the minute the scope of what was happening, rather than people jumping up and celebrating, like this is what I was wanting to happen in the 90s. And it's almost like today we talk about the Marvel and the DC superhero movies. There have been attempts from cinema movies down to really crappy TV series over the years, right? Mm-hmm. Where people tried to bring things to life, and even when they were quasi-beloved, or all the way beloved, like, Bill Bixby, the Hulk, right? Mm-hmm. They were, they suffered from limitations of TV production and time, but they were still, okay, fine. And Lois and Clark and whatever. Batman in the 60s. But it's only been now with CG, the tech, and the budget paradigm landscape to do these Marvel movies. And of course, if you're Martin Scorsese, you may think they've ruined cinema forever. But to really tell the original root, the root content adequately in live action on a camera, we're just really now to where they can do that adequately and get the full scope and power of what the original comic creators wanted to have, and they were limited. True. They could do it on a page. And up until now, if they weren't successful, maybe it was because we just didn't have the tech to do it. And not so much the tech, but the landscape for Star Trek has been such a wasted universe all these. Just like the online game was the first. When my son explained to me the concept of I'm kidding, massive multiplayer, gaming. Yeah. It's like, Jesus Christ, forget Star Wars. Star Trek had all this. There's aired canon. There's 700 hours of actual, it's not trading cards and books, although we've got that too. But it's like prime canon, tier 1 canon there's hours of it, and you can go explore that. And then you could get into niches and create what hadn't been created for gaming needs. And that's the same idea that now that we're in this streaming world, and you're not tied down to, it's got to be 26 episodes and we got to run 7 years so we can amortize a budget out over 7 years. And we know that we have a 1.5 million pattern budget and we can go above, and we're going to use our movies that are our icing on the cake. And we'll amortize, we'll do spacesuits. We'll do the new EV suits out of the movie budget and bring them back to the, and the new uniforms and the new combat. I mean, these sets, we'll reuse them 15 times, but they'll be the new sets we built all that whole paradigm is now not out the window, but it's like, that was so limiting. Like, can we just do like a mini series? Oh my God, we'd still have to design it. We'd only get 6 shows, and 6 shows worth of commercials would come in for it. And how many toys are we going to sell on a 6 show? That's all moot now. So in a way, to me, aside from just these titles being out there, number one, no, it's not overexposure, because we're talking about 13 episode seasons. We're talking about things not being stacked on top of each other like the old days when DS9 and Voyager would be on, and they'd be on crappy channels, and people would either be griping it was too much to keep up with, or they either liked Voyager and not DS9, or they wanted to like DS9, they couldn't find it because it was on their hockey channel and it was bumped to 3 a.m.
Atlanta Braves baseball. That's what happened to us.
Yeah. But I mean, like all the things that now you tell somebody, you tell a Gen K-er.
A Gen K-er, right?
A Gen
Let's
K-er.
Be consistent
it's K,
here.
I guess, because it's sci-fi and it has to be a K word.
It's K for canon, Larry. This is our generational canon that we're establishing right here.
Okay. You tell Mr. Orb host, you tell somebody that young what the hoops you had to jump through, like why the DS9 audience wasn't so big in first run, maybe.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? Like, people missed 2 shows, and they're like, I'm so behind, I can't keep up. It's like, it wasn't even like totally serialized. Yeah. But it was like, oh my God, it wasn't a standalone. Or, oh my God, I couldn't find it because I didn't have my DVR set right, and the basketball game ran long. Yeah. And it's just like crazy, like my telegraph key broke, so I didn't get the message.
Larry, this is the moment in the Ready Room where I have to once again tell the story of Deep Space Nine's fascination and what was apparently intern week or weeks at the local affiliate in Tuscaloosa, because they played Fascination like 4 times in a row. And
really?
Yeah. Because that episode, I'll never forget the opening of that episode. It's the little necklace dangling down, because we saw it in first run. And then the next weekend, when we're supposed to be able to catch another one, they replayed that one again. And then the next time, this next time slot, we're definitely going to get the new episode for the week, because it's when they would normally rerun it. There's Fascination again. It's like, guys, you've got the wrong tape in. So it's really happened.
It's so funny. It's intern week. Yeah. I can tell this is isn't it funny how those moments will haunt you for your entire life?
They will. I mean, how many years ago was that? It was like 1995, 6. Yeah.
Did I ever tell you the story about how Channel 4 in Oklahoma City played Next Generation at 10:30 because that's when they had played the original series reruns the last time they had a shot at it. Yeah. And you think that's insane, but their thinking was, are you kidding? Do you know what kind of ratings we get with Star Trek at 10:30 on Sunday night after the local news? We'd never get those kind of ratings with anything else. And I'm like, but you would get even bigger ratings if you put it at a normal time. And so they finally, going into 4th season, they had a big, okay, fine. But Best of Both Worlds Part 2 of all the times to change the airtime and then not tell? They didn't promote it? So here they wait. So Monday night's local news comes on and they go, Star Trek fans, we heard you. You all, you didn't you wondered where Star Trek was last night at 10:30. So good news. We're putting it back there. And I'm like, no, that was not the message. People just wanted to know where it was. They didn't want it. Because in the old days, NBC, it was an NBC affiliate. If the AFC games ran long, people would set their VCRs and finally you just learned to just set it for a 3-hour window and catch the damn game, the show when it came on. Which is why I had some episode with the 8 is Enough reunion wedding special on my
And that's how your 8 is Enough fandom really kicked in, and that's why you do that 8 is Enough podcast now when you're not doing the Trek Files, right?
That is, when I'm not doing the Green Acres podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but I mean, boy, that was out to left field. I'm sorry.
We went on a Generation K sidetrack here. So... anyway,
my point was, when you tell a Generation K-er all these obstacles to viewing DS9,
right,
their eyes cross over because they're totally meaningless today. It's like telling somebody how hard it was to get a telegram sent.
Yeah.
Or how to fix when your typewriter bogged down or something. I mean, it's like, what? When my horse lost a shoe. It's like, what? How did that stop life? What had happened? So
when that boulder rolled in front of the cave entrance, and we didn't have enough people to roll it out of the way.
We didn't. We had to take the wagon off the wheels and go across the river. But my point here is, people worry. They saw all these titles and they went back into. It was like suddenly it was 1992 again or something. It's like, no. There are 13 episode seasons. They won't overlap. They'll all be stretched out. They're trying to sell a streaming service, and they're going to until they can have 7 shows going, which they're not going to do at once. They're not going to overlap them, so people will keep the things subscribed to. Right? The whole thing of I'm turning it on and off.
Someone at CBS All Access just said, "Larry, hold my Romulan ale." You want 7 shows running at the same time?
Yes.
I can do that. I might even give you 8.
I can just see that said, and I can just see John Vinsiter's voice saying that. Hold my Romulan ale.
Hold my Romulan ale.
I think he knows that 7 shows at once wouldn't be a good idea. But I would see those concerns from people seeing all those titles announced and go, guys, that's not going to happen. The other side of the coin here is that just as when you had DS9 and Voyager, assuming you could see one or the other, that they weren't to people's, total taste. People, on one hand, people look at that and go, "Oh, never have 2 shows on at once because it divides the fandom." It's like, well, that's silly because lots of people watched both and some watched one or the other. And forget what's happened since, and people come around to one or the other they didn't see at the time or they didn't appreciate at the time. But all of these different flavors of shows, Picard is going to be, they say, I love it when Kurtzman keeps saying it's a more character-driven show or it's a more dramatic show. It's like what Discovery wasn't dramatic.
Unlike all those other Star Trek series.
Yeah, those light, fluffy shows.
Just about the space battles.
Yeah, or the joke, the Flintstone endings. The ha 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 ha. It's like they're all going to have slightly different. The animateds are both different flavors, and hopefully they'll attract a quote-unquote younger audience, but some will be teens and tweens, and some will be 20-something. Anyway, the point here is, this really is, whether people are like, oh, it's Kurtzman producing it. No, it's different pools of people, different tones, different attacks, finally, different subject matter, maybe 13-episode season, maybe a 10, maybe a miniseries of 3, maybe a 2-hour movie. You've got the freedom to do that, the freedom to, and even the Nick Trek, hashtag Nick Trek, is going to be on Nickelodeon, not on All Access. So maybe it will be available to more people. People say, well, we're not booming because people have to pay for All Access first. And even that's changing because it's pioneering a new technology, delivery method, and people are getting over that. But the bottom line here is, we really are on the cusp of a new golden age. You think of the 90s as the golden age, and like the 94 and 96, and that was kind of the apex of Star Trek. And in the, not just for us as fans, but in the public mind, the public eye, and bringing in new fans, even more so than the JJ movies. I'm sorry, but still did, and that was good when nothing else was happening. But the apex of Trek until recently was like the 94, 96 time.
Yeah,
but that's what we are now.
We thought of as the golden age. So now, it's like a second golden age of Star Trek.
And if you think of it this way, which I used in some of my my promotion for my holiday gift things this year. It's like 2020 is going to be the biggest year for Star Trek this century.
That's true.
And technically, I think, DS9 ended in 99, and that was the last time there were 2 series on at once. So yay or nay on having 2 series on. Just as far as output goes, that was the last time it was that big. I know that 2020 is going to give us the clearest vision of Star Trek.
I think so. Certainly.
It's going to be a 2020 look at everything
I
coming.
hope some of that bleeds over into my own eyes.
Yes.
I could use some better vision. But okay, so it's
I feel
second
like we're getting
golden
really
age
bizarre
of
here,
Star
Chris.
Trek.
Yes,
we are.
If you enjoy personality-driven podcasts, this ain't it. No, wait.
Okay, so it's a second golden age of Star Trek. Let's talk
Yes.
specifically about some of the shows. Picard. What do you think about the concept? What do you think about Picard coming back? Initially, when I heard there was a possibility of Picard coming back, I was not very interested in it because Picard, as a character, first of all, Picard was one of the most influential characters to me growing up. The Next Generation premiered when I was halfway through high school. And so Picard's calm, philosophical approach to things, his leadership style, influenced me a lot as I finished high school and I went through university. And I think it played a big part in who I am today. And I also felt that character had been developed in the movies, developed quite a bit. And they kind of took the reins off the character a bit in the movies. And I didn't really see the need, I think as Patrick Stewart himself felt initially, didn't really see the need for that character to come back.
I was going to say, your qualms are all of his personal qualms.
Yeah.
Right.
But now that I know that he's on board, first of all, and I know he would have never come on board if he weren't happy with the story. And when I see who's behind the story, and now we're getting the teasers of what the story is, and I've been reading the comic book that's come out, the countdown leading up to it, I'm really looking forward to it. And I think that they're going to do the character justice because there's no way he would come back if he didn't believe that was going to be the case. And one thing that's very interesting is in some of the clips, some of the cast members said that as they were shooting the show, Patrick would stop them sometimes and say, no, that's not right. The fans aren't going to buy this the way we're doing this. So he's like very aware of how fans perceive Star Trek, what their expectations are for Star Trek, and especially for these characters in Picard and some of the others who are coming back that we've known before. So I have great faith that we're going to get something good. I don't think it's going to be like The Next Generation, of course, but I think it's going to be a worthy continuation of Picard's story.
Well, if you remember over the years, like way back in the ancient days, like, 8 years ago, we would have these conversations and people would, the clamor for the whole, why do we keep having prequels? Why do we keep having sequels and prequels? Why can't we move forward? Which went from Enterprise to the JJ movies and even the beginning of Discovery. It's been this clamor of, can we move past Nemesis? Can we get past Nemesis? Let's move it. Okay, so there's several things are going on here. One is, this is a post-Nemesis movie. And it's not just because that's what people are screaming for. It liberates your design sense and all the fun things that we've seen people, the uniforms and the ships and the combat design. I mean, the things that people are wetting their pants over. That's cool. Yes, it can go logically forward and not be shackled. But what else is happening is by moving forward, again, in the paradigm of media that we have now, we're not straitjacketed into 26 episodes a season, 7 a year. I mean, the modern lay of the land with these short seasons, but also just that we're spending cinematic, 6, 7, 8 million an episode amortized out, I think, on Discovery. The mindset of, here's the Voyager cast and here's the DS9 cast. It's like, it's the friggin' Star Trek universe. This is what I started to say with the online game. It's the entirety of the universe. I laugh when I see these people. Some people, I don't know where they came from. I think it's just the clickbait crowd that are getting rich off, or trying to be off YouTube clicks.
It's trying to get attention, right?
Trying to get attention. But this whole reaction, now, I don't want fanboy fan service either. But when I see people see Data or they see Troy and Riker in this thing, it's like on one hand you had people going, well, if you're going to do a Picard show, I want to see all of his cast. I mean, there's been hoops to this. And I knew Patrick's reaction as an actor, as a performer, was in exactly yours as a fan, was that we don't need more of the same. But that's impossible because it is 20 years later. And when we used to talk 6-8 years ago, I said people who wanted new shows to go into the future, we have not had enough real time go by to make that make sense because we're already catching up with the tech and the look of Next Generation, which was supposed to be 80 years beyond the original series that we've also already overtaken with our pads and our flip phones, which are now smartphones. We now have Mike's Elcar's display on all of our phones now. I mean, touch interface. We have to have some kind of a gap come along, which will be inevitable between the tech of production and just how the world is designed. That's going to be inevitable. We have to let some kind of a gap go by to let that happen without being real conscious about it. And that has finally started to happen now because the pace of life and design and culture is going forward at a pace. So that's happening. The media is changing, but also this group, whatever people's qualms about Kurtzman is, they get the vision that quit thinking in these boxes of shows. And for all you people that wanted to advance a show, and for all you people that are mad or sad because DS9 never got a movie and Voyager never got I sound like red buttons. Voyager never got a movie and whatever. It's like this format will allow, if they're smart, to break out. And so when they first said, well, we don't know if the cast is coming back, I just thought, I was disappointed, but thought, well, that's not very smart. But the other smart thing is they've got to have new faces to appeal to younger audience. Yeah. And the smartest thing of all would be to cross-pollinate these casts and whoever it makes sense, not as fanboy fan service, but what makes sense for a story.
Right. It has to work for the story. Yeah.
And what's impressed me is, aside from the fact that early on, Patrick was in the writer's room, and I didn't know Michael Chabon, apart from he won a Pulitzer for his alternate future stories, but when it turned out he was a huge fan and was starting to talk about his fandom. But the day I think I've mentioned this, the day they tweeted, Instagram the photo of the whiteboard where Kirsten Beyer was in the room, and they did the 10-stroke. Here's the crosshairs. Here's Federation. Here's Romulans. Here's the Klingons. When they did that, and it was not only just a clue and insight into what they may have been talking about as early, the grid for the show, what the format is, but the fact that they were doing that and they had it basically, neutral zone, Romulans, Klingons, da-da-da-da-da-da. It's like, oh my God, somebody. Who let the guy or the girl in the room that knew what they're doing? It's like, are we really on the cusp of having a really awesome show here where they're pinning the format on like they're savvy and they're smart about it and they're going to use the whole universe and every piece that's come along since. Here's all our new faces. Oh, shock the world. We've got Brent and we have Data. We have Seven. We have some of the crew. Not everybody, but we have some. We're thinking about going 3 years. Well, maybe you're not going to cram everybody all in the first season. We're going to have this story on different levels. And, oh, look, Romulans, Borg. It's like, oh, my God. And then who do you see pulled in when you're talking about Borg? Look, it's Hugh and Seven, who, like Locutus Picard, were former. It's like, oh, my God, this is all. It's just the mix of new faces, which you have to have and appeal to, get some young actors in, but have plenty of old faces if they make sense. All of these pieces are just making this really exciting whole in the way it's shot and and some of the little touches. And they have, it's just like, it's almost like watching Next Generation studiously not have any original series in it. And then you get to DS9 and Voyager where they DS9 especially, where they feel relaxed and we'll do the I'm a doctor, not a line. And we'll throw in Tholian and Andorian and Tellar, They were totally relaxed when TNG started not that way. And it's almost like that way with Discovery, not the same way, because Discovery sure used the canon. But it's like Discovery was the pioneer that got the ship up and running again. And now Picard is like enjoying being the second kid in the family.
Okay.
So like on all of these levels, people are not only excited for Picard, it just feels in the bones. It just feels in your bones right for so many reasons, but that's kind of like all the feels or all the reasons. It's like everything that I'm seeing just looks savvy and smart. And, if I wanted to be blunt, I'd just say, well, duh. It's like, if gave any of these things a thought, this is exactly what you should have done to maximize the fans' enjoyment, maximize new audience, and maximize, your profit. I mean, it's like when all these things are in sync, and it's just everything. I mean, have you, in anything you've seen, have you felt like you've seen a false step or a miscue? Everything has seemed to be golden.
No, everything has looked great. And I've seen stuff where I feel like this is not the final cut. They haven't done the final color grading or the final visual effects or the final refinement. So what we actually see is going to look a lot better than this. But knowing that
people lost their stuff over Data's face, which was ridiculous.
Yeah,
but, right.
And I thought that was silly. Like I didn't even think much about that. There are just some scenes where there is a problem, I think, with camera technology has become, the resolution has become so great that it's almost like with digital photography, still photography as well. We've had to learn how to kind of refine that image that's being captured right out of the camera because it's too real. Like it's too high resolution. It just doesn't feel cinematic. It doesn't feel quite right. So there are still steps that you need to go through. It's like with still photography, reapplying film grain from classic film stock.
That's what we did with Continues. Was Star Trek Continues was all shot digitally, but we put film grain back into it, so it felt
grain back in, right?
Yeah.
And so there, especially in the very first trailer that came out, there were some moments where I felt like, okay, this is probably not the actual footage finished that we're going to see yet, but this still looks great. So whatever we're going to get, I think this is going to be a really fantastic looking series. It's going to be what we expect. It's going to be on par, of course, with what Discovery's doing, which has visually been a fantastic show. And yeah, story-wise, as we get more clips and more dialogue coming out, I feel very comfortable with it. And I feel that, they're bringing Riker in, they're bringing Troy in, they're bringing Data in, but they're not bringing them in as cameos because fans expect them to show up. But they're bringing them in because it makes sense for Jean-Luc Picard as a man to want to communicate with these other people who he has spent so much of his life with. And if he didn't communicate with them, then the story might feel false because where are these people that Picard has relied upon for so many years?
That's why I think this whole and again, it's bright and shiny and yells, but to put it in perspective, some of these voices that are saying, "Oh, it's fan service," I just say, "Shut up! It's the canon, it's the universe." Whether you're talking about specific characters or you're talking about Borg and Romulan and whatever, it's like it's the lay of the land. That's what the pieces are. And if you're going 20 years into the, if you're going ahead, which is what I thought the majority of fandom was screaming to do anyway, then what else are you going to do? They're exploring some really cool, some post-Dominion War aspects here. And if the Hobus supernova, subspace shockwave supernova, after it finally got retconned, is a thing, then, Star Trek Online has been exploring this post-Romulan apocalypse comeback as it played out. I mean, one of the things I've been curious about is we've had 10 years of increasingly tightened pocketbooks canon, where they've done these pieces, which spanned, broke out. And again, Kirsten Beyer was a big part of that, but also all of our favorite author guys and gals. But they've really had, as an overall thing, they've had a pretty tight, massive, going forward.
Yeah.
Because basically, the shows are all dead. We don't care. Here, you kids writing books. There's hardly any money in that, so just have fun. Here's the keys. But they took Pocket, and everybody in licensing took that very seriously. the authors certainly take it seriously. And for anybody that says, how do you pull the whole canon in? Canon is so hard to write for going forward because it's like a rock around your neck. I'm like, no, Dayton and Kevin and David and go on down the list. Kirsten, they all pull all the canon in and tell great stories that are original.
And they communicate with each other.
And they well, that's the thing. There's a coordination that's intentional. Yeah. It's very much a thing that's doable. And then you also had online, which has got a very tightly, and they're going, 40, 50 years in the future, but they have to pull backstories in, and haven't done it, they've pulled enough background to tell their stories, their campaigns, but increasingly now Kirsten's role is to going forward have comics and books and everything reflect canon as canon adjacent as possible. Yeah. There's already cases where a name has changed on screen that was in one of the earlier novels of Discovery, here and there kind of things. But they're really, really trying, and we live in a time when that's the barriers, just like the TV movie wall is down, and this is like a hybrid. They're finding ways not just about ego, but like how you pay people and do rights, which was also which was always the biggest bugaboo on this, but how you coordinate back and forth across comics, books, games and all that. Yeah. That's the goal, at least, and maybe they falter at times, but at least that's the goal. But I'm wondering, as they move into Picard, what they do with the last 10 years of book canon and game canon, and it looks like that's already being, retooled, and they're already making, the countdown. The new comic is trying to tie that up, but they're conscious of it, and it's not just being left willy-nilly. It's all and being used to market and being used to toss out some clues. So it's like, again, it's like people are finally wising up and living in 2019 and looking at all these things not as obstacles or as blind spots, but here's all we've got to play with.
Well, I mean, and that's something,
just make everybody happy.
And that's something with the J.J. Kelvin verse that he brought in too, the idea of using the comics, especially the comics, but comics and novels and other merchandise to fill in gaps and build clues. And it's something that even goes back to Lost, where that's just sort of an approach that he had, or that he still has carrying forward. And so that's something that our prime timeline Star Trek has inherited in a sense from the way that the Kelvin timeline story was told, because, the original Countdown comic led into the 2009 film, and then they had another, and then there's the entire comic series that's set in the Kelvin timeline that helped fill in the gaps of those films. As we're talking about authors, of course, we can't forget our good friend Una McCormick, who's writing the first Picard novel. Oh, yes. Which is, I've already pre-ordered it, and I'm really glad that they got Una to write that. And yeah, we're just filling in gaps, and we're pulling the timeline together. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with Picard and, of course, where they go from there. One other thing I want to talk about while we're talking about these series, besides Picard, is Discovery, third season. We're talking about jumping ahead. We're not jumping ahead 20 years. We're jumping ahead 1,000 years. I mean, we're just going all out. It's like when Discovery, when they came back from the mirror universe, Stamets tells Saru, we're where we're supposed to be, but we overshot by 9 months. Here it's like, man, we overshot by like a whole millennium. We're just like nowhere in the ballpark anymore. So, when
you start depending on those flimsy Section 31 inventions, instead of you using your tried and trusted spore drive, this is what happens.
But seriously, I can't remember if you and I talked about this or not on here when we did our recap show where we looked back at season 2. But even if we did, since then, we've gotten the teaser trailer and, we see the idea that the Federation has been reduced to like 6 worlds in the future and so forth. First, I'm curious what you think about that. And also, there's this one little element hanging in there. I'm wondering how they're going to resolve it, which is the fact that Georgiou is with them, but yet she's the centerpiece of the Section 31 series, which is going to be set, as far as I know, back in the 23rd century, which makes me wonder if this trip to the 31st century is a temporary stop before they come back, or if somehow she's just going to get back on her own. But what are your feelings as more news and more information comes out about season 3?
Well, what's interesting is overall, what's ironic is season 3 to me, and I know this is like, well, of course, that's the way Star Trek is, but Discovery season 3 may finally be the time in the year when the show finds itself. Like, the first year was trying to get to a certain point, but it suffered from the chaotic birth, right? It was lucky to land. Second season, Ensign Mount comes on, the whole, and Ethan Peck and the Pike and Spock and Rebecca Romaine, number 1. That whole layer was amazing. Ensign Mount just explodes. Now everybody demands a Pike series with all of them.
Yeah, I want one.
They'd be crazy not to, or at least something. More than 3 short treks. There's got to be something.
Yeah.
But as far as like the original promise of Discovery being kind of wacky and weird and cutting edge, Bryan's original idea was for Discovery to be an anthology series set in different times moving forward, which is why he went before Kirk, and then he was going to, the more we get away from this, the more I'm sad, because all those times that I personally want to see a series, I just want to fill in the gaps in the timeline and set series mid Kirk and Picard, and I would like to see a Robert April series. I'd like to see all these different, or a Romulan series, or a Klingon series, or a Tellarite Prime series, for God's sake. So, by the way, Harry Judge and I have a hashtag time for Tellar Prime, just so we can spread that.
Time for Tellar Prime.
We could shorten it to time for Tellar, but it's time for Tellar Prime. But his original
Tellar
Bryan's
time?
Tellar.
It's like it's Miller time. It's Tellar time.
When it's time to relax. Wow, that'll take you back.
You're not
okay,
gonna finish
or
the
maybe
song?
not. No. Are you kidding? One thing stands clear. Tellar clear.
Tellar
no, that's
Prime.
crazy. Tellar Prime. If you've got the snout, we've got the time. No. It's like by this. What's funny is so they've sprung way into the future, and they're also supposedly in the Beta Quadrant, or at least that's what the idea was if they went to Terra Elysium. And you got a blip from the Beta Quadrant at the tag of the last episode on Pike's Enterprise. Now, no one said, oh, yes, we're confirming they just said they got that blip. It's a signal, and maybe it was, and maybe Georgiou is with them. There's so much gap there to play with, whether it's where do they wind up and where are the shows set, and how they get Georgiou back to prime timeline in the 23rd century to go on with her show when it's time. A famous Vulcan once said, no one dies in science fiction, meaning you can, Leonard Nimoy, after Star Trek II, but you can fix and do anything you want to do, whether it's about people or it's situation or whatever. So I'm not worried, they'll do Georgiou when they're ready to do her, get that set up. Look what they've done so far. They've been, all over the place with what the main thrust of the season's been, and it's about to change. But I just think that in this next season, they may finally, in a weird way, fulfill what Bryan was trying to do, only finally find a way that fits the skin. They just are going to feel comfortable in their own skin, I think. But what's weird is we're all assuming they're, tens of thousands of light years away in the Beta Quadrant, and all those years, hundreds of years ahead, where we don't know for sure that's exactly where they land, when and where they land, and where they come back. Because we've seen Andorians and Tellarites and what else? We were breaking this down 3 or 4 months ago.
There's a Lurian in there.
Yes. The Lurian.
Running in there.
And there are left-handed Andorians. Well, we've already learned so much from Discovery Season 3.
Well, if they're left-handed Andorians, all my expectations are like out the window. I don't know what to think now.
See, it's just it's crazy. It's wide open. Dogs and cats living together.
Do you know how hard it is to swing an ice cleaver with your left hand, Larry?
I'll take your blood to Andorra.
I don't know. I just roll it like according to the old FASA manuals, and I'm there. But my point is, they're back at some of the familiar worlds and some of the teaser footage that's been out. So my thing is, do they go and come back? Do they actually not get where they think? And maybe the signal is a false signal. Maybe, they say there's a signal from the suit. Maybe the suit whatever. There's a lot of questions. I feel like they're obviously ahead in time, whether it's the full, what is it?
1,000 years, 930.
Yeah,
I think it is.
I was going to say it's not 1,000, but right. Whether it's the full gap or not.
I just round
and
up there.
That's fascinating. What's also fascinating is all those pitches from people trying to restart a Trek series all through the fallow years. Everybody, post 9/11, everybody was going to sometime in the future when the Federation is not, everybody was looking at what's the most interesting texture to go to that's not the same, but we can still be heroic. Well, Enterprise was let's show how we built it and didn't have all the answers and weren't perfect, but we were still noble. How about in the future when things did not sustain for whatever reason, but we're still trying to be noble and get back to where we were? And that's exactly what, if that's true and that's the way that goes, that's exactly what that is. So in one hand, it's like that was the impetus from a lot of different people to go with the next Trek in the future would have been a place, would have been the place to go with that. So but it's so funny that Discovery is losing out to Picard in the good feels and promotion department. Of course, Picard's coming up right now, and Discovery doesn't even have a date yet. But I almost feel like Discovery is going to sneak up on people who are used to maybe not hating it, but they're just not used to being that enthused about it. And there's a lot of people enthused about it too. But I just almost feel like maybe this third season is going to sneak up on people because they're going to, obviously, somebody is, whether it's Michelle Paradise or whatever, somebody is feeling, again, confident enough to get in and wallow around in the canon that we know. It's just in a different time, if not place, and do some fun things with it. Again, play with the universe, with the canon, and given that situation, now go with it. And yes, have an incredible looking Lurian that looks exactly like I mean, it's like that. It's not like it's a new series like I was mentioning about Picard, but somewhere the hesitation, the shackles are off. It's like people are comfortable in their skin as creatives and say, go for it. And let's go back and pick up all these known elements and use them now. We don't have to feel weird about it. So I'm very excited about Discovery, even though right now it's losing, like no one's paying attention, which is ironic. Yeah. This whole thing about the writing season being offset from the airing season is just crazy to me. They're talking about, by the time Discovery, just like Picard though, by the time these shows start to air and they have their premieres, they've shot the whole thing and they're working on the next season. Yeah, exactly. Coming up. It's a bit different than what we were used to in the past, which I think we talked about on here last time. Yeah, my season 3 expectations, I'm curious to find out, what happened to the Federation. I think it's a natural storyline, and I think it's one that reflects some of the realities of the world that we're living in right now. The idea that this empire or this Federation, if you look out a few centuries down the road, it has fallen. It's not gone completely, but its reach has been greatly diminished. Its standing in the galaxy has been greatly diminished. That's at least the impression that I get from that moment where they lower the flag. Right. Is what I take from that scene as a message is, look, the Federation thought it was wonderful and it was great and it endured for a few hundred years, but there's always pressure from the outside. There are always threats, external and internal. Yes. And if you don't take care of it and if you don't make the right decisions, then you will fall. All empires fall. If you don't take care of those little cracks, they turn into big cracks. And then you have fissures and then you have... Right. And we're seeing that in the world these days. And so I think that's where Discovery will continue to be, as it has in the first 2 seasons, a commentary on the current state of the world, which some people get upset about, and some people write news articles about and try to get everyone stirred up. But really, that's what science fiction is, and it has always been. And it's why the genre endures, and it's why it's popular, is it's a commentary on our own society. And I think that Discovery's done a good job of that. And I just last week, over the course of 2 days, I rapidly rewatched season 1 of Discovery and realized that element of the storytelling, which is very Star Trek, is there a lot more than I had realized the first
however many times. I've probably watched the thing 10 times. And it's not that I missed it before, but it's that watching it very rapidly, I was just kind of following that thread and noticing that they do a much better job of conveying that core element of Star Trek than people have given them credit for.
There was so much, I want to do that same thing, but there was so much new hitting people between the new look, the new team, and just the whole streaming hoop to jump through and, the world changing. There were so many things that I think we may be in for a DS9 style relook by folks who either watched it through at the beginning with all the chaos going on around it, or who didn't watch it, but they watched the watchers watch it and heard and soaked it up and still had opinion. But I think it's going to be due. They watched the watchers, yes, which social media allows you to do.
Yeah, right. The one thing that I hope is different compared with seasons 1 and 2 is I hope that the end of the story of season 3 isn't that Michael Burnham saves the Federation through time, because some people I know probably don't want to hear this, but I don't like this singular focus on this character being the salvation of everything. The character's fine. Sonequa Martin Green is fantastic, but there's just a little bit too much of it's Michael Burnham. Everything comes back to Michael Burnham. And I prefer Star Trek when it's not like everything comes down to this one character. I think the strength of Star Trek has always been its ensemble casts. And of course you have some characters that are more important than others because of the hierarchy of the ranks in Starfleet or other aspects. Right. But here, especially because they decided to make the lead someone who's not the captain, to have everything in the universe, the salvation in season 2, saving all life in the known universe, fell upon her shoulders, was a little bit much. And I just hope that season 3 isn't going to be yet another one of these where, okay, well, we're almost a millennium in the future and the Federation has fallen on hard times, and somehow this one person is going to save it and make all of time right again. That's the one thing I hope we don't get, but my expectations for the story are high, so I am looking forward to it.
Yeah, I remember when you kind of exploded with that. I didn't think of that so much because I was just kind of trying to be aware of the problematical birth and then seeing things settle down and then realizing how much they were going to lean on Pike and Spock and number 1 in the Enterprise and trying to be happy for the big black and red redesigned Enterprise bridge with the inner corridor around the back, which, okay, fine. Because people were happy for it, and I guess so. Okay, fine. I don't want to be the old guy with yelling at the kids on the lawn, but
okay, Boomer Sooner.
Yeah, go Big Red. I didn't want to be that guy, so I just kept my mouth shut. But because that's the way that, and in fact, I've got I totally forgot this. I have somebody planted an idea with me a year or two ago, and I'm just ready to embrace it. I won't get into it now, but there was so much attention went to Pike. I didn't feel like she was, because he was doing his part, although you knew that he was, you knew he was going away, and when he got the the time crystal show, but saw his future, and they tried to bring in, the literal flashbacks and bring the canon around. But also when they did the jump and so they've written Tyler off with those who stayed. So he's out of the main cast now. Maybe he's just, treading water until they get the Section 31 show going.
That's what I think.
Yeah. And he's happy to do that. But, of those who, Stamets and Saru and Tilly, and they've taken pains to show that, I started to say Tig Notaro, that Reno went with them. And they've got all that poor undeveloped bridge crew that have barely still scratched the surface they ought to use. And maybe they'll get to that more so.
I hope.
And they're not going to compete for Michael Burnham time. But, if you're worried about the Wesley Crusherization of Michael here, only it's like, here's what we were making fun of back in the day, but this is the worry now. Even whether it's 60s lead, second banana, everybody else format, or it's lead and then ensemble that the other shows had, it didn't fall on one, the captain all the time. So I don't know. It didn't bother me that much. And maybe it's just because of the perspective, but I would like to think, even though we've only seen her walking around with the guy from the future as far as like actual real footage, I would like to think they're going to go like Doug Jones as Saru is going to get at least some equal bits to shine with. And I hope
he's going to be the captain, but
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking that with Next Generation, we had growing the beard, and with DS9, we had shaving the head, and with Discovery, we now have growing the hair. Because she's got some luscious hair when we first see her flipping through her space iPhone.
I was going to say, in 47 different styles, that's when they do that time lapse.
Yeah. But I wasn't thinking of her like in the Wesley Crusher sense where, oh God, Wesley saves the ship every time. That was a bit ridiculous because he was a kid on the ship.
He being a junior.
Somehow these officers who are the best in Starfleet, who have been stationed to the flagship, can't get themselves out of trouble. And somehow Wesley Crusher saves them all. It's nothing like that at all. Michael Burnham, when we meet her, she's already the first officer of the ship. She's obviously an extraordinarily intelligent and well-accomplished officer. So the fact that she does all the things that she does makes perfect sense. For me, it's just the fact that it all comes down to her. Like, I wish the whole reveal that the Red Angel was her mother had been it, instead of like, we got you. Like, we knew you thought it was Michael, so we're going to tell you it's actually her mother, but it's actually really Michael. We were just joking about that. It is still Michael. Right. It all comes down to Michael. It's that kind of thing that's what I'm talking about. Like, everything focuses on her. It's not the Wesley Crusher, save everybody, save all the adults kind of thing.
So this whole thing about Michael being the one to save, it's almost like, why is the Enterprise the only ship in the sector that can go save the world? Hold my beer. Sort of. Forget ship. We're going to have it be one person. Yeah. That's kind of where you're coming from, I guess.
Yeah. And you said sector, but was it Sulu who said once, we're the only ship in quadrant?
I know. I'm retconning as I go. I'm trying to put the franchise in a good light here.
And at that point in time, they never went to the Gamma or the Delta quadrant.
Stop quoting Star Trek, Chris. You're going to ruin it.
So I guess they only had 2 ships because Enterprise is the only one in this quadrant. Then they've got like the Yorktown over in the other quadrant. And then there's no one else around. Yeah,
they're a 2-quadrant Navy. Yeah. Good on them. Yeah.
And anytime Earth's in trouble, all the ships are off on assignment somewhere else. They're all in the Beta quadrant at that time.
They're all secretly doing gaseous anomaly studies.
That's right. Yeah.
When the quadrant's in trouble, I am not slow. So it's hip hip hip,
only
and
one
off
here.
to warp I go. Yeah.
All right.
I'm the only one here.
It's like Earth's in danger. And the only person left is Beverly and Remember Me. It's just her in the bridge in that little bubble. The rest of the ship's not even there anymore. It's just her.
Hey, I love that show. That's a great episode. I was so thrilled.
It's one
to
of my
see
favorite
Gates
episodes, actually.
I was so glad to see Gates and Crusher both get that focus finally.
Yeah.
I think that even predated Jerry.
Well, yeah. I think we've run our course of talking about Picard and season 3.
I'm sorry.
Discovery.
I believe you meant to say, I think we beat this to death.
I think we have. Yeah. And of course, we do have other shows coming up that
I'm very excited about the animates. I think I mentioned that I'm excited to see them finally get into maybe we'll finally sell some action figures. I think I've said that a million times.
Well,
but seriously,
I'm sure we'll do that.
And I want to see how they deal with canon and almost contemporary events in animation form with a light touch. I really think they're going to try to be serious about this. And if there are mistakes made, they're honest mistakes.
Yeah, I will say that, between the 2 animated short treks, I enjoyed Ephraim and Dot more than The Girl Who Made the Stars, just in terms of, it was fun, and they had all those wonderful little homages to the original series, and it took us through time, and I learned something new. I mean, all these years I've been doing Star Trek podcasting, and I thought I knew things pretty well. I did not realize that the Enterprise A was destroyed in Star Trek 3. I learned that.
Okay. Okay, Xer.
But I love the animation style of The Girl Who Made the Stars. And I would really love to see a Star Trek series the way they did the Clone Wars with Star Wars. I'd love to see them do a Star Trek series or even multiple series with many seasons done in that style. I think they could tell great stories. I don't know if that's something that they're going to do. I don't know if that's going to be the style of the Nick one. I know it's not the style of Lower Decks. So who knows?
My luck, that's what the Tellarite show will finally be. It'll be
probably. At least, you know, there's enough detail in all that. You can really see the snout and the hooves.
No, I know a lot of people jumped on the A. What's interesting, though, is it was Michael Giacchino that wrote a couple of fans nicely, after some parts of fandom, like, melted down over that. Like, here's all these cute homages, and they go to the trouble to get audio and probably had to pay Shatner and George and the estate of Ricardo Montalban for the dialogue. And I know, Sick Bay didn't have a window. Well, maybe it was like up high and it was a thing. Because it's inside the middle of the saucer. Okay, shut up. But that my thing was, how long did those tardigrade eggs take? Because, like, Wrath of Khan was like, 15, 17 years after, 20 years
I was thinking that also.
After Naked, and I love how Naked Time happened after Space Seed. But anyway. Yeah. My thing is just going to be, it's a tardigrade, and he's bopping around the ship, and you saw it come in and out of warp, and the tardigrade is like Ephraim. Ephraim is such an old sounding name. I have trouble attaching it to and I know it comes from the original name for the tardigrade character. Don't send me letters. It's so close to Zephram and Ephraim. I just wanted it to be like the original vaudeville act, the guy that invented warp drive and the tardigrade. But it spans all this time, and at first I was like, how long did they hang out? Because at 1 minute you're original series, the next minute you've got the A or not on the number. It's the refit. Right. That's years later. Yeah. But after, like, rewatching it, I'm going, okay, that tardigrade's running in and out of warp. There's just some kind of, like, quasi watered down spore effect happening here where years are compressing. And that's how I went, okay, you know what? That's how, like, all the wacky little things that aren't strictly canon. And yes, I know it's animation, but I'm in my head canon, I'm just going to say that in that stream, the tardigrade was just interfering with the flow of time. And just upset things, and I still regret the A being on the hull. But that's my basic answer for that. But I just want to say, a couple of fans brought that up, and Michael Giacchino, to his credit, in good spirit, the way I always would try to do when I'd point things out and we'd talk about it and we'd start retconning. It's like, okay, you pointed it out, now just retcon something, just smooth that over somehow. Yeah. But Michael Giacchino in a Twitter and in an Instagram said, hey, oops, we just missed that. I mean, he didn't, like, get defensive. He didn't get weird. He was like, oh my God. And he didn't go, Jesus Christ, people, we gave you 42 other cool things and you're going to focus on the one thing we messed up. Yeah. But he didn't. He said, oops, maybe we can fix that. That got bias. Because I can just see somebody thinking, even when they've done the ship, like when Mike's done the ship charts over the years, and now we have all the classes, here's all the Enterprises stacked up. People just naturally go, it's been glossed over unless you lived through the 80s. I think a lot of latter-day fans who love the original series and the movies, I think for some people, and maybe people on deadline and creative occupations working on Star Trek, it's just like they think of the refit as the A. Rather than the A was the replacement ship at the end of, after 3 into 4. I just think as you look at the ship classes stacked up, the Enterprises, the third one to bear the name, the fourth one to bear the name, that people just think that's the A, because then we get into the A, the B, the C, the D. Yeah. When the ship, it's not like, no, it was a refit. And then it was that is a kind of a thing that if you didn't live through watching those movies at the time, or you're a hyper ship nerd, I think 3/4 of fandom that's come along in the last 15, 20 years. That's a thing I can see totally. And if it's if it's a team working on the show and they think, and they're so thrilled because they've oh, look, we got the Doomsday Machine in. Oh, look, we've got the Tholian Web in. Oh, look, all these little touches, and they've leaped ahead. My whole thing was that they bridged the whole thing. They bridged 15 years in two different ship things. So I've already reconciled that. But
my headcanon is different than yours, and it's a lot simpler, actually.
Oh, share.
That tardigrade... Obviously, that tardigrade was very mischievous. And as you said, it took those eggs a long time to hatch. I think he just got bored one day and he just painted an A on the hull, just for kicks. That's my headcanon.
Well, I think my favorite, and you know what? I waited a long time before. I didn't wait. It's not like I was waiting. I just... the holidays and everything and things going on.
For as long as your sun has burned, I've waited.
I've waited. No, when I finally, but heaven forbid, I saw all the online traffic, yay, nay, and in between. But I really enjoyed the music cues.
Yeah. It was good.
There was like some on the nose stuff. When the tardigrade it goes from the black and white, bad social studies, film. And he's laid his eggs, and it goes from being an old school nature film to, it's like the Oz moment when Dorothy opens the door, and now you're in color, but it's the Enterprise bearing down on him. Yeah. And there's one of the basic themes from the stock library of the original series coming, one of the Enterprise orbits flyby to open a show themes. That was awesome. And even they couldn't use it. I'd like to know what the rights were. They didn't use the Muck Team fight song on the nose.
From a Muck
the theme. From a Muck Time, yeah. But they had like a thing that was tonally and structurally the same.
It was close enough, though.
It was very,
worked.
People got it.
Yeah.
But it was curious because they'd had some exact themes earlier and not that. So I was like, okay, fine. I enjoyed that as much as all the nods.
Well, I enjoyed it, and I thought that's where you could also feel Michael Giacchino's hand behind it. Like you could feel that a musician, a composer is behind this story because it was so musically driven as they jumped.
Well, and it's old school animation,
but those cues,
old school Looney Tunes.
It felt like Looney Tunes. Yeah.
And the other thing here is, Looney Tunes, this Hanna-Barbera Looney Tunes thing, but I'm still laughing about how .7, and by the way, .7, like they pop up in one Discovery, and now we've retconned them back to what does DOT stand for? I've been trying to find the acronym.
I don't know what DOT stands for, but that's a 47 reference, Larry. D, it's the fourth letter of the alphabet. And a 7.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. I feel so much better now. No, I'm fine. I just think but what got me in this cartoon was this animation. No, cartoon.
It is a cartoon. This was a cartoon.
Yeah. As they animated, and I'm not worried about being canon because there's so many wacky things to it, but as they animate the .7 flying, there were times when it had the same beep as Rosie the robot from the Jetsons. And then I realized they're animating its flight attitude at the way that if Rosie was like at full tilt rolling along in the Jetsons, it was like the same attitude. And then there's everything from the Bam Bam throw, of the tardigrade of Ephraim to, there's so many little funky little bits that I was thinking as it flew by, little cartoon shout outs. And I know that, and they've done some good making of bits and talked about that. But I was like, wow, that whoever picked that beep out, which is not constant, it only turns up at certain times. But I was like, that had to be a direct it's not an homage, at least inspired by Rosie. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch an original Jetsons with Rosie the robot made, because she had that kind of metallic beep.
Well, those were both good, the animation, and they were very different in style. And when I heard they were going to do 2 animated short treks, I felt kind of like, well, I'd rather just have all live action short treks because that's what I'm more interested in. But I was glad they did these because it showed me, as we head into a time when we are going to have a couple of animated Star Trek series, that, it works. And of course, I watched the original Star Trek, the animated series, but that lives in its own time and place and the style of the cartoons that I watched growing up. And I know the new ones will be different. So it was good to see, and we'll see where they go in the future. I kind of have the feeling we're going to end up with Clone Wars type Star Trek animated series where it's not comedy, it's not going to be humor like Lower Decks, it's going to be just straightforward Star Trek storytelling like the original animated series was, but done in a style probably more like The Girl Who Made the Stars. This showed me that it will work.
And that's fine. I mean, I remember thinking for 10 years we should be, I mean, that's what we could do. And it wouldn't be, budget busting, and we could do worlds and cultures and things. Did you notice who did the voices for Ephraim and Dot, though? Which I didn't realize until the second time I watched it.
I think so. I've only watched it once.
So Kirk Thatcher is the narrator and does the mock Picardish voice. Kirk Thatcher, who was the assistant producer on some of the mid-level TOS movies, but most notably on camera was the punk in the bus.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember now.
Song.
Yeah. I read this that he did the voice. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah.
And then
awesome.
Then the female voice that's credited is Jeanette Goldstein, who played the young Latina Marine in Aliens that they patterned Tasha Yar after.
Oh, okay.
And then totally finished the circle and was the science officer on the Bee in the epilogue of Generations.
Ah.
I was like shocked. I'm like, wait, what? Is she doing voice work now or what? Or was this like a complete, like, let's just have let's have Kirk Thatcher and Jeanette Gold. let's pluck out two people from Star Trek's catalog of cool quotable people, like neat, and pull them in and have them do voice work on this, standalone, separate, wacky short Trek. Anyway, it was, and then at the same time, not the young girl that plays Michael's voice or whatever, but, Kendrick Green, who played her dad in the live action show, does the voice in the short tracks on the Girl of Stars.
That it was him.
Yeah, and they patterned his face after, which was cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
that they went that way. So yeah.
All right. Good. Well, I think we have talked about Star Trek long enough today, but it was good that we could get back on mic together, and we should promise that it will not be 6 months before we get on mic together again. 2020 has to be different. Yeah.
If we can do less than 6 months, we might do less than 3 hours next time. So
maybe. Yeah. All right. Well, it has been fun talking about all the new Star Trek content that's on the horizon. And I'm also glad we got a chance to talk about Aron and Dorothy and René, but it's not the only thing that we've been talking about here on the network recently. So here's a quick look at some other things you may have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm, continuing mission.
Why they killed that officer, what they have to do with Project Perseus.
Can I just throw my 2 cents worth in and say, I know who they are. They're Smurfs.
Oh, if only.
From the planet Smurfia. Tell me I'm right.
If you insist. Sure. You're right. You're not. But I'll tell you.
Oh, no. I've ruined it. Nice. I've ruined it for everybody.
So, yeah, that's the first mystery, and then a series of other mysteries happen as it becomes clear that on at least one other of the Visionary class ships that they're now well on their way outside Federation space, that there was a saboteur.
Earl Grey.
But the first day of shooting, I shook his hand and I said, Mr. Nimoy, you seem to think I know what I'm doing here, but I really don't. And he had said to me in the audition, for the Vulcan mystique, think 1,000 years of wisdom behind the eyes. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's a tall order.
Yeah, that's a lot to put in the eyes.
Literary Treks.
We're not messing around anymore. The reset button is gone. Characters' lives are going to move forward. Fortunes are going to change. When things happen, you can take it seriously. It's not all just going to get forgotten by the time the next book comes out next month. This is going to be something that is going to carry forward and is going to have lasting repercussions on all of the literary books, not just the ones written by Mac, not just the ones in this particular subseries, but by joining them all together and having nods to the Star Trek Corps of Engineers, to Voyager, to DS9, to Enterprise.
Standard Orbit.
We've had some various folks in guest star roles and things that had passed here and there, the last year or so, and all of that is sad. But when somebody who is really a part of the foundation of what Star Trek is and what it became, it really hits you kind of hard.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
So check out all of these shows and find out what we're talking about in your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe. You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, Apple TV, or now desktop on your Mac, where there is a podcasts app. And you'll get the latest episodes as soon as they're published. And please leave us a star rating and a written review. And if you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered there as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud. Really, any third-party app, you're going to find our shows there. Plus, you can stream them or download the MP3 files directly from our website or grab the RSS link if you've got some other tool you'd like to use. Now, Larry, you always have all kinds of exciting things going. I'm not going to ask you about that thing that popped into your head that you can't talk about right now, but tell us what else you have coming up on the horizon.
Oh, well, I'm starting the 5th year of Portal 47, which if everybody's enjoying.
That's hard to believe.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, we had the anniversary open house last fall.
That's where everybody literally comes to your house, right, Larry?
It is. It's amazing. It's global, and yet we just beam everybody in from wherever they are. No, it's the next best thing. It's everything that we can do on the internet. But no, it's all about deep diving. It's about backstage. It's about some of the voices that are not heard. And people, for some reason, enjoy hanging out with me, which is kind of wacky.
I enjoy hanging out with you, Larry.
Oh, really? 6 months.
We've been doing this for...
Not a letter. Not an email.
Hey, but to be fair, I haven't hung out with anyone else in those 6 months either.
That's true.
Except
I'm
my
kidding.
colleagues. But no, we've been hanging out on Mike for 8, 9 years, 10 years now.
It's scary how this is.
I was the one of the first episodes of the Ready Room, so it's been a good 9 years.
Yeah, the wild and woolly Wild West days of podcasting. It was just blue sky. So no. They the Trek Files is going on every Tuesday. You can get to that on Facebook, and my really enjoying doing my Tuesday Facebook Live show, which I'm trying to get across to YouTube and get even more people on after the fact. But doing that at 1:00 every Tuesday Pacific. I took a week off for Christmas week, but I'll be back every week again. So the Trek Files and Tuesdays Live, but Portal 47 and my Trekland Treks Day Tours. If you're in LA and you've got a day, please set one aside, business or pleasure. If you're in LA, look me up. I've got the menu of over 40 location sites. It's awesome to take people to Berman-era Starfleet or to, Vasquez Rocks and all that, but there's lots of other places to go to. And I'll lead you and guide you and leave you some souvenirs, and we'll have lunch. And that's all at LarryNemecek.com. So I'm looking forward to building that. But of course, I've said this for months. We've been off the beam of the Con of Wrath, and I need to get back and get that going and done and sold. So that's kind of it. There's something else probably new happening that I'm leaving out here, but at the moment I'm just trying to make sure everything is on the growth and up and up. So if people, LarryNemecek.com and Larry Nemecek on Twitter and Trekland on Facebook, Larry Nemecek's Trekland, and hopefully we won't be distracted by too many more losses of some of our loved ones and creatives and heroes. And we can get on with building things and being excited about Picard and this brave new golden era that we keep talking about. Hopefully it will all come up as amazingly as it's all seeming like it's laying out to do. So anyway,
I think it will.
And hopefully, yes, we'll get on before another 6 months, Chris. Hope.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I don't really have anything exciting going on in the world of Star Trek or podcasting these days. I'm trying to get back into podcasting. I hope 2020 is going to be better for me on that front, and I can share my thoughts with you guys as I used to do very often. If you would like to dig into the archives, though, you can, of course, rewind to, about 9 years or more of this show. You can catch Matthew Rushing and me on The Orb talking about Deep Space Nine. You can get my thoughts on Discovery if you look through the Edge feed for the episodes called Notes from the Edge. And you can also read some of my writing about Star Trek over on the official website at StarTrek.com. And if you'd like to catch me online, the best place is Twitter. My username there is CBryanJones, letter C, and Bryan with a Y. And you can also catch me in the Babel Conference from time to time. That is our listeners group on Facebook. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. And the best place to do that is in the Babel Conference, because you can converse with other listeners there as well as hosts from the network. Just type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come up. It is a closed group. You'll need to answer a couple of simple questions and then click the button to join, and an admin will let you in shortly. If you'd like to use email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Please choose the Ready Room, and that message will come directly to us. And you can also find the network on Twitter and Instagram at Trek FM. And also our main Facebook page is at facebook.com/Trek FM. Now, if you'd like to help us keep all of the shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. We have so many different podcasts here on Trek FM, and it does take quite a bit of money and a lot of resources to get them all out to you. If you go to patreon.com/Trek FM, that's Patreon.com/Trek FM, you can get all the details. We have various perks, including early access to some episodes, exclusive content, producer credits. You can become an associate producer of The Ready Room or any of the shows on the network. And we also have a special website called Patrons Zone. We need your help more than ever as we enter our second decade of podcasting. So please consider becoming a patron of the network at patreon.com. And we really appreciate all the support that we get from you. And thank you all for supporting the network. All right, Larry. Well, thanks again for staying up in the wee hours of the morning there in Los Angeles to record with me. Evening here in Tokyo.
That's why it's so dark here. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
And it's dark here too. But we're two voices coming from the night, from the void,
passing each other in the night
to share Star Trek with you.
Yeah, Chris. Let's not let 6 months go by next time. I know the Star Trek world won't let us go that long.
No, there'll be plenty to talk about.
Yeah. But as for right now, I think it's time to stick a deactivated .7 in it, because the Ready Room is done. Recording.
Number one's Major General Pants.
Okay.
That was that whole episode of Q&A, the short trek you watched with number one and Spock. I didn't get it. I just...
And they're so thrilled with it. And I was like,
so many people I know were like, oh my God, I just loved that short trek, and I loved seeing how Spock and number one met. And I'm like, guys, you don't have to love every single Star Trek thing that they do, because that was kind of pointless.
Well, the idea was they were going to show why he was Shouty Spock at the beginning.
I did get the Shouty Spock part. That part I liked, but after that, it was kind of downhill for me. So.
But we saw Shouty Spock this is him with number one. We saw Shouty Spock still with. Okay, forget it.
Well, maybe he decided. He decided if number one can sing, then I can shout, and he just decided to keep shouting, and it became his own little quirk. Maybe he told number one that if you don't let me shout, I'm going to tell people about you singing in the turbo lift.
I just came away thinking between the 23rd century and the 24th century that somewhere the heirs and the Gilbert and Sullivan Foundation got themselves made the official operetta. HMS Pinafore is the official operetta of Starfleet. So the only thing,
right?
Forget it. Yeah, it bridges the centuries. If you're going to break out of classical music, you're allowed to do, because that short-lived experiment with rock in the 2250s just went nowhere with 20th century rock. And since music was banned after 2160, whatever, contemporary music was banned. Okay.
All right. Okay, so let's,
we're just like the world's crotchiest podcasters.
Man, will we ever get around to actually
back
recording?
In my day, in 2011.
Boomer, okay. Just
that was kind of funny, the whole okay boomer thing. I went, I grew up in a place where we said okay boomer and okay sooner and everything.
Oh, well, yeah, we haven't talked live since this happened, and I don't remember if I tweeted to you or not, or I did like a subtweet, but when that started, I thought at first it was some kind of new Oklahoma Sooners thing. I thought, okay, boomer, let's go boomer. Boomer Sooner. That's what I thought. And then I realized, it's millennials making fun of, they think they're making fun of Gen X, but actually they're referring to the parents of Gen X.
Which I lose track. I go by age. I lose track of what now. Because I know people want to make everybody younger than 60 a millennial. It's like, no, or 50. No, they're not. It's like there are 2 or 3 in there somewhere, but I lose track of, because baby boomers, it's like World War II ended. If you were born after 1945, up until that ran its course, until everybody had 2 or 3 or 4 kids, then it ended, like in the mid 60s. That makes sense to me. And then there's one that came after that, and then people stopped having babies after 9/11. I mean, it's like, what defines the other ones? I don't know. So so I just go by age. But I do hear people say there are a lot of people that just go, anybody younger than 40 or 45 is a millennial, when that's stupid. Or millennials are way older now than, by definition, than people. They think a millennial is anybody under 30. It's like, no, it's a complete.
But at the same time, anyone in their 20s thinks that like anyone over about 35 is a boomer. So they don't know either. Okay, let's just jump into this. And
we have a complete other side of the room podcaster.
There's a whole other side of the room in this one, yeah. But it's got us ready to talk, so that's good. All right.